I got a great question from a viewer. So in this video, I want to talk about adjusting the timing of your meals when dealing with SIBO. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So over on our How to Fix SIBO Fast video, Emin2 something or other asked, I would love to know your opinion on meal spacing when you have SIBO. Do you think it's best for people with SIBO or for anyone looking to improve digestion to leave longer gaps between meals, like at least 4 hours, with nothing in between? Or do you think people with SIBO should have like 5 to 6 smaller but macro balanced meals daily? And is there any bio-individuality thing we should keep in mind as far as meal spacing or number of meals goes when trying to conquer SIBO? So this is a great question, and I've heard this from other people as well, and there's quite a few things to really think about when you're going to look at the timing or the spacing of your meals when you're dealing with SIBO. And you know, some people have the viewpoint of, you really want to let digestion rest, so you want to wait longer, and you should probably fast and do all these things. And if you don't eat this food, then you're going to starve the microbes and all these things. So there's some validity to all of these thoughts, but the degree at which each person is going to want to look at them is really going to vary greatly from person to person, depending on what they have going on. And one thing to think about is all the discomforts that can come about when just eating food when you have SIBO. Because when you have SIBO, you have all these extra microorganisms in your small intestine where they should not be. We shouldn't have a lot of bacteria in our small intestine. The majority of our beneficial bacteria should be in the large intestine. So the problems come about when someone has bacteria in the stomach and the small intestine, or some other type of microbial overgrowth like a fungal issue or yeast or something like that. These can be similar problems. But when we look at the discomforts that come, they come because of these microorganisms and the person's inability to digest their food correctly. So they get all this bloating and all this gases, and the gases come from the bacteria being activated by these foods that come in, as well as the foods rotting and fermenting and creating gases and pressure and all this bloating stuff. So people are like, oh, well, if I don't eat for a long time, I don't have this discomfort, so that's better for me. And that really makes me feel better, so that must be the right thing to do when you have SIBO. But the reality is that you're not really fixing the problem when you're going without eating. Now, there are benefits that can come from not feeding the bacteria, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you're not really correcting the problem in most cases. You just feel better because you're not dealing with the symptoms that can come along when you eat food. So when we're thinking about putting a little more space between our meals, one thing we want to think about is that the body needs a lot of resources to digest. Digesting our food takes more resources than just about anything we really do. And so if a person already doesn't have a lot of resources and they're not digesting their food correctly, so they can't get the minerals and nutrients and all these other resources out of the food that they're eating, then they can really get stuck in a bad place. And maybe they do a little bit better when they eat a little bit less often and don't need to use up as many resources for that digestive process. But when that's the case, there's almost always digestive malfunctions that are going on. And most people with SIBO, in my experience, have low stomach acid. And that's actually probably why they have SIBO. They have SIBO because they were not producing enough stomach acid to fry all these bad guys when they came in on the food that we're eating. And those bad guys come in on the food that we're eating. And that HCl in the stomach is not just there to help us digest the food and break it down so that we can get the nutrients out of it. It's the barrier to the whole body. So when someone doesn't have enough stomach acid, the bad guys come in and then they set up camp and they have a party and they create all this trouble. So it can depend on the malfunctions that are going on. Is someone have enough stomach acid to digest their food correctly? Is someone's bile flowing correctly? Because we need those two sides to meet. We need the acidic food to leave the stomach, and then that's what signals the gallbladder to squirt that alkaline bile down into the small intestine to neutralize those acids. And it's that connection of the acid meeting the alkaline that creates this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and get all the nutrients out of it. but it's really common for someone's bile not to be flowing correctly. So if a person is having these malfunctions, they really need to take steps to correct those issues. And my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, chapters 3 and 4, kind of walk a person through figuring out what aspects of digestion are not working correctly. And if so, what steps should they take to correct those issues? And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below so you can get the whole thing totally for free, and that'll walk you through that process. So when I'm looking at a client that's dealing with SIBO and I'm going to talk to them about the spacing of their meals and how often they should be eating, I want to look what steps are they taking to improve any type of digestive malfunctions going on. Are they taking steps to thin the bile out so that it can flow correctly? And are they maybe using betaine HCl to acidify the stomach? Because if you're taking steps to basically synthesize digestion, then you may be able to eat a little bit more often or even a little bit more and do okay with it because you're helping the body break that food down correctly. So if somebody is taking steps to synthesize that digestive function and helping their body break those foods down a little bit better, then I like to see them maybe only eat 3 meals a day. And there's scenarios where someone might only want to eat 2 meals a day and maybe fast through breakfast if their body is set up to do that. But what we have to think about is that if a person has really low resources and they're going to go an extended period of time, then the body's like, hey, I don't have anything and you're not bringing anything in, so I'm going to raise these stress hormones to help the body function correctly. And the stress hormones going high can create a lot of trouble. They can create weight gain problems. They can cause the bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly and then restrict the person's ability to digest their food the way that it should be digested. So we really don't want these stress hormones going high a lot. So when we're looking at this, what's the bio-individuality things that we need to look at, then we need to understand that, we want to look at our nutrient levels and what are our electrolyte levels. And you can just look at your blood pressure, like your resting blood pressure, like at least 2 hours after a meal. And if that systolic number, which is that top number, if that's below 112, then that's a really strong sign that your mineral levels and nutrients and resources available are probably on the low side. So you might not be able to go as long without food. You might need snacks between a meal just to function as a human being and to keep your body from raising these stress hormones that can go high when there's not enough resources there. Another bio-individuality thing to look at is to look at, am I leaning on the hypoglycemic side? Am I processing carbohydrates too aggressively? And we like to tell people to look at their urine pH to get an idea of what might be going on in this scenario, because when a urine pH is high, like over 6.2, then that seems to correlate with someone's insulin being a little bit too aggressive and maybe processing carbohydrates too efficiently and creating basically sugar crashes. So if someone's eating high carbohydrate foods and creating a sugar spike, they can really create a sugar crash. And then if their resources are low, so that mineral levels and blood sugar are both going low at the same time, that's going to create a world of trouble for a lot of people. And that way we might want to see them eating smaller meals more often in the day just to give their body a little bit of nutrients out throughout the day so they don't have those crashes. And Emma924, I can't remember what it was, also asked about, balanced macros. And keep in mind that I don't know your situation for the person who's asking this question, so I'm not giving you specific advice because you can see that it's really varied from person to person. But balanced macros can be very important, especially when digestion is having some problems. But we have to keep in mind that, I'm going to make sure that I get enough protein so that I'm not just eating these carbohydrates that are spiking and crashing my blood sugar and all these carbohydrates that are just feeding these microbes, because it's the carbs and sugars that can really feed these microbes and be problematic. So when a person can reduce those, then that can really help. And that's part of what people talk about when they're like, we got to starve these microbes, so let's get rid of all these carbs and sugars. And that certainly can be a valid step to take. But we need to look, can a person digest? Can they break down their protein? Do they have the ability to emulsify their dietary fats so the body can utilize those dietary fats? Because when you lower carbs, you need to increase protein and fats, or you're not getting really anything. So if a person can't digest protein, then the balanced macros doesn't really matter because the body's only breaking down the carbohydrates and sugars that are easier to digest anyways. So we want to first help a person digest proteins better and help acidify that stomach enough to break the proteins down into the amino acids that the body can actually use. So yeah, reducing carbs and sugars can be beneficial, but how many carbs does a person need to function? If they can't process proteins and fats and you take their carbs away, then you just took away their only fuel source, and they're going to yell at the mailman because they don't like their shorts because they can't function as a person. So you want to reduce the carbs to a level that you can tolerate. And we like to tell people, try to eat what we call medium carb foods. Get rid of these high carb, starchy things and sugars of bread, pasta, cereal, junk. Get rid of all this processed junk and eat foods with carbohydrates that won't create such a big spike and crash. Things like, butternut squash and yams and Brussels sprouts. These are food. These are actual real food. That's what you want to eat. But include enough carbohydrates that you can still function, especially if you're one of those people with the really low blood pressure, indicating that you might not have enough minerals in the system to function well without getting enough carbohydrates. So you can see that it's really a little bit of a complicated scenario. My answer is that I really prefer to see people eat 3 meals a day. And if they're eating a very low carb diet, maybe a keto or a carnivore thing, then maybe they can fast through breakfast and do some intermittent fasting on some days if digestion is working correctly and they have enough minerals and making sure the body is working correctly. If you're trying to fast or skip all these meals without those things going well, then you're creating a burden for the body, and it's going to raise stress hormones that are going to magnify a lot of other problems. So I like to see people eat 3 meals a day, but I like to see them qualify to eat 3 meals a day. And if they're not digesting, or maybe they don't have enough resources, maybe they need to go to 4 or 5 smaller meals until they can improve those issues enough that they can go longer without bringing in a fuel source. So it can be a little complicated, but if you work through those things with yourself, and my book shows you how to do a lot of those tests to figure out if you're leaning imbalanced in one area with the electrolytes and that kind of stuff. And you can run those tests at home with tools you can pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store. So it takes some effort to actually figure that out, but then you're doing what's right for you and your body instead of just guessing or doing what all the cool kids are doing. So I hope that helps. And right now, if you do feel like you have a low stomach acid issue, then jump over and check out our video on 4 steps to improve low stomach acid. I can't wait to hear about your results.